Hi, I'm Jerry Bowyer. Welcome to Meeting of Minds podcast. My guest today is Rick Graber from the Bradley Foundation. Rick, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Great to be back with you.
I very much enjoyed your recent op-ed about educational freedom and educational choice, which then led me to the video series that you folks at Bradley have done called Expressions for Educational Freedom, which goes into a lot more depth. And I've seen 3 videos. Are there more coming? Is this an ongoing program?
Yeah, there'll be a couple more videos. There'll be 5 total.
So you and I have talked before about this. It seems like maybe, and we can get into the reasons why, but it feels to me like we might be in a once-in-a-generation opportunity for private education and school choice because of some of the revelation recently of the failures of the system. Does it look that way to you too?
Oh, I think that's right. And I think COVID has perhaps speeded up this process quite a bit with parents becoming increasingly involved in their kids' education. We certainly saw it in the Virginia governor's race. We've just been through an election in this country, and lost, I think, through all the clutter was a real victory for parents having the ability to choose and school choice across the country. We've all heard about efforts that Ron DeSantis has done, certainly in Arizona, Governor Ducey, some great progress in West Virginia, but there were other governors across the country that really focused on school choice as part of their campaigns. Governors in New Hampshire, Iowa, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, even New York and Illinois, places that you wouldn't expect. School choice was a key topic, and it was one in which the ultimate winners said in one way or another that they were very open or great advocates for giving parents the ability to choose on their child's education. That's great progress. That's not something that we've seen before, and I think it's building. It's got to continue to build. We're just not delivering for way too many kids across this country, and I think now is one of those times when we've got to start moving the needle.
Well, it's great news, but it's unknown news.
Yes.
If I didn't know you, if I weren't talking to you, I wouldn't know that. I haven't seen any post-election commentary that talks about. I mean, I'm a conservative. You know, I and most of my conservative friends were a little disappointed
Yes.
by the way things went. Although, to be honest, partly the disappointment to me was already into place through the primaries, right? In other words, I'm not sure that we were making the best choices in the spring.
No, I think that's right.
For implications in the fall, right? Because they got to win both elections. That's the point. They win a primary and a general election. There's 2 of them, and I'm not sure that we remember that they have 2 every year. They've got 2 elections. But still, I was still disappointed, although maybe less surprised than some other people. But I'm actually heartened now to learn that school choice was a big victor on election day.
Corey DeAngelis, who's really a great writer and proponent on school choice in the country, has an editorial in the Wall Street Journal over the last day or so that really talks about all this.
I didn't see that.
Great.
I'm going to look that up, and maybe we can link below that in the show notes. I think that's something that people ought to know. And maybe it also, we're going to wander here a little bit, so I'd warn you in advance. Maybe
wandering is fine.
Thank you. You can handle it. I know that from talking to you before. Maybe some of our messaging was angry and a little weird and a little, kind of not mainstream American, etc. But as opposed to, quality of life issues and, solutions. And like I'm watching this video series from you about educational freedom. Nobody here is depressed. Nobody looks angry. They all look like people who are facing challenges and overcoming challenges. And I think voters were looking for that. And it sounds like school choice is a winning issue for us because it's an upbeat, it's a buoyant, it's problem solving, it's quality of life. It doesn't have that kind of negative energy that a lot of campaigning has taken on.
I view it as a moral obligation, a promise that we have made or should be making to the kids of this country, such that every single child, whatever zip code they come from, should have an opportunity to get a good education. And what's the best way to do that? Well, after 35 years of Bradley Foundation involvement in this topic, we think it's parents. We think parents are best positioned to make the best choices for their kids. Will it be perfect in all cases? Is every parent willing and able to make those choices? No, but most are. And let's start with that presumption that we should start with parents when it comes to their child's education. And then the second point is give them as many choices as we possibly can, whether it's public schools, private schools, charter schools, home schools, some combination thereof. The more the better, because the more choices they have, the better chance, I think, the kids of getting an education that fits for them, not just the standard way of doing things the way we've done it in this country for too long, uh, to the point where we are today, the results are just not there.
Hmm.
We're failing too many kids, and let's use this as a rallying cry, this moment in time, to start turning that around in a
All
big
right.
way.
I'm sorry. I cut you off. Did you get to finish what you wanted to say there?
I sure did.
All right. So this moment in time, I want to zoom in on that. Why is this moment in time such a, I would, in the Greek, a kairos moment, a hinge moment? It feels like that to me in the education reform movement. Why do you think this is such an important moment?
In many ways, I think it's coming out of the pandemic and COVID and the awakening that seems to have created. There's no question that shutting down schools for as long as they were shut down was a tragic and horrible mistake in many places. Some schools didn't shut down, but many did. In fact, most did for way too long. And I think we'll look back as a as this being a very bad decision for the youth in our country. But what it did do was awaken parents. It awakened them to what their kids are being taught in school. It awakened them to the quality of the education that these kids were getting. Um, and it, I think it awakened in parents a sense that we got to take some control of this. That this is our family. These are our kids, and we've got to have a voice in this. And while the pandemic was not good and the results were not good, perhaps it has created this opportunity and in fact crisis that we've got to address. And as I said earlier, in talking about the states that are focused on this, we've never seen this kind of broad support, and we're seeing it in local elections, school board elections,
Hmm.
in places all over the country too, where before parents just didn't worry too much about their school board elections. Now they are because it makes a difference.
Yes, and I it was a revelation, I think, of priorities. I'm gonna be tough here. You can join in or not, so I'm not gonna put you on the spot to join me in this. But the question is, who are the schools for, right? So officially, they're for the kids, right? They're for and to some degree for the parents. The teachers stand in loco parentis, which means that because parents maybe don't know how to teach calculus, for example, or have day jobs, the teacher is standing in for the parents, teaching something for the good of the children, acting on behalf of the parents. And so the teacher is the servant in that process.
Yes.
All right. But if you shut down for 2 years, and as much as COVID is a problem, it really isn't a huge problem for children, right? It was a very the risk was very much distributed out at the older end of the age curve. You just didn't really have, you don't have super high risk for 6 year olds from COVID,
Right.
right? They were not highly susceptible. And so it's shut down for them. Well, probably not because they're low risk. For the parents, well, if it's for the parents, then you would ask what the parents want to do and they could send them or not. So it seems to me that the system revealed what its priorities were, and it didn't seem that the priorities were the kids or the parents. The priorities were the providers inside the system. And once that's revealed, I think parents, they notice it and they don't easily
Yes.
forget it.
Yes. I'm happy to join you in that. I don't
Okay.
think kids have been the priority at all, and I think teachers unions have been a significant part of the problem.
Hmm.
Certainly, the leadership in teachers unions have been a significant part of the problem. Um, you're right. It seems as if they're trying to protect a system, a way of doing things that shouldn't change in any way. And that's not right because the kids are not coming first in that equation. They should be coming first. I'm a big proponent of public dollars following students and then letting parents decide how they want to spend that money, like they're doing in Arizona. We don't quite do it that way in Wisconsin, but effectively the same way.
Hmm.
That's what we ought to be focused on. And you look at test results and test scores, particularly post pandemic, they're not acceptable. And whatever we're doing isn't working. So we all ought to be open. And this shouldn't be a partisan debate between left and right. But let's sit down and figure out how we can do a better job educating our kids because right now we're not. And the statistics are very clear on that. Not everywhere, but in large urban areas, in many rural areas, but particularly in large urban areas with Black and Hispanic kids, we're just not delivering.
Yeah. And I
And
suppose
that's not good enough.
it is largely a partisan issue, but I think looking at the experience there in Wisconsin, where you basically got it started, Tommy Thompson, Polly Williams, you know,
Dr. Howard Fuller,
exactly that.
unlikely bedfellows, but
That's it. In other words, it's a little bit bipartisan in that if a conservative who really believes in compassion, links up with a liberal who really cares about the kids, though that doesn't just talk about caring about the kids, but really cares about the kids, you can get these cross the aisle coalitions. And it seems to me that I think pretty much every school choice program that I've seen get through the legislative process around the country had that kind of reach across the aisle element to it.
there's got to be. And we've got to have politicians that are willing to step up and have some courage on this and undoubtedly take some arrows in the process. But it's for the kids and it's for our futures. And um, we owe it to each other to do that. I hope we can see that. We're in a pretty entrenched society right now that's worrisome. We don't have enough of those political leaders on both sides
Hmm.
willing to come together on this very, very important issue.
Now, you mentioned this is a key moment, and partly the COVID shutdowns in the sense that they were shutdowns, and that indicated that maybe this system isn't about the kids after all, right? And it's left them 2 years behind in many cases. Another part of the shutdown was that education didn't necessarily shut down. Part of it went online through streaming services, which now created the possibility as parents, as observers, when they had never been able to be observers before. And when they set the little one up in front of the Zoom that day, and maybe once, maybe mom's going by and she's doing some cleaning and she's listening a little bit to what's going on, parents weren't necessarily liking what they were hearing. How much do you see that as a factor where there was kind of a revelation of some of the ideological capture of
Oh, I think it
classrooms?
was. I mean, first of all, the online working for the most part didn't work, but what it did do was open up a window for parents to see what was actually going on. Why aren't our kids being taught civics the way you and I were taught? Just understanding fundamentals about how our government operates. And why aren't we talking about the greatness of this country? Yes, there are flaws, but at the end of the day, there has been more opportunity, more ability to be an entrepreneur, to start a business, to do great things in any field than in any other place on earth ever.
Mhm.
And that is just a fact. And we're losing that. We're becoming so tribalistic that we're losing sight of what it means to be an American, and losing sight of those things that we have in common as opposed to how we differ. And I think there's a longing for parents to see some of that in many places, and there's not enough of it. There's some, and maybe it's parents acting with their feet now that they can more and more, and putting their students in places where that is part of the curriculum, that is part of the discussion, that is part of the culture.
Yeah, and as I think about it, my mind just took sort of an odd jump here as you were talking about civics, right? Chives, right? Keyways, city. So a city has to be bound together by something. right? There has to be some kind of commonality for there to be a city. Otherwise, it's not a city.
Right.
It's two warring tribes next to one another. It's a border, not a city, right? So if there's a border around it, it's a city. If there's a border down the middle of it, it ain't a city, right?
Right.
And ideologically, we're more in the case of a border down the middle. And what I see being taught in schools is it's not just not teaching civics, it's teaching anti civics, it's teaching group identity trumping
Yes.
civil
Yes.
order and civil commonality. So it's worse than ignorance. It's
Yes.
worse than neutrality. It is destruction of the civil structure. And no wonder cities are burning.
Right.
And no wonder left wingers and right wingers are picking up rifles and doing. I mean, if they're told that fundamentally your group identity is what you are, and fundamentally you have to be at odds with a different group identity, you cannot really have common ground. Common ground is an illusion. Then people who are psychologically unstable will take that to the ultimate conclusion, which is violence. And other people will, maybe they're more psychologically stable, they'll just pull out of civic life. But it tears the city apart, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, if you're told that you're a victim and there's nothing you can do about it, and there are people out there that are oppressing you and always will and always have, how do you build optimism? How do you build hope for a future? You just can't. But that's not what America is. It's just not what this country is. And it's so much fun for me to go into the schools that we support that are in the video series, the leaders of those schools that are demanding excellence, that aren't making excuses, that are demanding that these kids meet expectations and have accountability and responsibility, and not accepting any excuses at all for failure. That's where there's hope, and that's what we ought to be building on. And with the leaders that we talk to, that we fund, those same people are all over the country in every single community doing incredible work.
And you just said if you're told that you're a victim, and I would add, then of course you're not likely to succeed. I would add, if you're told that you're a victimizer automatically, and that is immutable, that is ontological. If you are a member of a historic victimizer group, then you are automatically a victimizer. Then that also causes a withdrawal. You can't redeem yourself by civic engagement now because you're bad forever.
Right. Right.
And so there's no reason to go out there and try to rebuild the community or build the community or
Right.
reach across the aisle or work together or help somebody, because you are always under accusation and there's nothing to be gained. There's no brotherhood or sisterhood possible because
Exactly.
you are immutably part of a victimizing class. So it paralyzes both the victim class and the victimizer class in some ways.
Totally agree. One of the things that makes this country unique has been our so-called civil society. And what is that? Well, it's not complicated. It's neighborhoods, it's churches, schools, it's voluntary organizations. It really is unique. And I had the privilege to live and work overseas for a time, especially in Europe. And it's just different, even in Europe.
It's Czechoslovakia, right?
I served as ambassador to the Czech Republic.
Yes. Oh, sorry, the Czech Republic. I'm going to get that right.
Originally
Yes.
Czechoslovakia,
Right.
yeah. And this notion of volunteering time and volunteering resources is very foreign in places like that. And it really is what makes this country unique and different. And we can't ever lose that. And again, when people are told that they're part of this tribe or that tribe and not Americans, it's damaging. And we've got to resist that at every point. And a lot of this happens in schools, and it happens at a very early age. And we got to address that. It's in my mind, one of the fundamental issues, one of the fundamental crises that faces our country right now. And we can't give up.
No,
we
I agree.
give
We
up.
can't. So I'm wondering, you said we can't lose that. And I'm wondering to what degree, how much are we preserving something that hasn't gone yet? Or how much are we trying to bring back something that to some degree already has retreated? In other words, to my view, we are not holding. We have lost ground,
I think
and
that's
now
right.
we're trying to figure out how to regain it. Do you
I
agree with
think that
that assessment?
I think I do. I mean, there's no doubt that there's been a breakdown in family. The statistics are pretty clear on that. Um, Less participation in, in organizations like the Rotary Club or Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. There's less of that. Little League
Hmm.
statistics are down. This was part of the glue in our communities that um, we're losing a little bit. Um, it's not all about nostalgia and the good old days, that kind of thing. It's about communities and uh, people working together with each other and trusting each other and befriending each other
Hmm.
that we can't lose sight of. It's a very special part of what it means to be an American. And it's somewhat in jeopardy right now. I agree.
I wonder to what degree there's a shift now in that what would be left of the glue that holds society together. You mentioned Little League, Rotary, fraternal associations. I have a lot of friends
Yes.
who are Masons, etc.
Right.
It
Right.
seems like they're gone. Honestly, I mean, I've spoken at some Rotary groups, and over the years, I've seen it down
It's
to,
getting smaller and smaller.
like in the back of the diner, me talking to 4 retirees.
Yeah.
Right? That's the
Yeah.
you know. Probably that we probably don't rebuild that, and maybe there is. Okay, here's the thesis. You tell me what you see. That spiritually neutral Americanist civil institutions are on the decline, and that maybe what replaces them would be non spiritually neutral, spiritually aligned, religiously aligned group. That maybe that as we take back ground, it probably isn't Boy Scouts, Rotary,
Right. I
Masons. It's
agree.
probably more explicitly religious organizations.
I,
Do you see that? Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair, and I think it's fair to say we're not going to recreate what used to be, nor should we. Um, uh, but we got to create this sense of community in some way and sense of commonality that, as I said, I think we all sense that has slipped to a pretty significant extent.
Hmm. Well, one of the things we see is that bad and tough times actually create the necessity for civil society.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's absolutely right. Unfortunately, too often government tries to fill this void,
hmm,
and government's not very good at this. I
hmm,
mean, I think we've shown that. There's been some great writing. Amity Shlaes is one of them that has talked about the impact of Johnson's Great Society, and that effectively it's been a failure.
hmm.
That's more government at play, more government trying to solve problems. People solve problems, neighborhoods solve problems, communities solve problems. It's not another government program.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything else you want to
As
say
always,
before I let you go? I know you're a busy man, and I know that my listeners like hearing from you. Is there anything that we didn't cover? Any point you want to make before we say goodbye?
I think we covered a lot of things, Jerry. It's always great fun to spend time with you.
It is as well. This has been Meeting of Minds podcast. I've been talking with Rick Graber from the Bradley Foundation. By the way, Google it, Expressions of Educational Freedom. Expressions of Educational Freedom, or just Bradley. If you Google Bradley
It's on the
Foundation,
Bradley Foundation website,
it is
bradleyfdn.org.
bradley.org/K12, right? Or you can even find
Yes,
it from the homepage. Just some
yes.
wonderful stories. If you're feeling a little down about what's going on in the world, you're going to look at this and you're going to feel better. Thank
There's
you.
hope.
Thank you for those videos, and thank you for the programs you're supporting, Rick.
Thanks, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Bowyer. Thanks for joining us.